Hello friends and recent players. Today, I want to talk about Cuba. There have been crumbs of info claiming that the US might invade Cuba sometime soon, with President Trump talking about a friendly takeover of the country. The prospect looms ever closer. As with every geopolitical chess move, it's a small play in a larger game. What is the United States' aim in taking over Cuba? They have resources that could be beneficial: nickel, cobalt, oil, and natural gas. I think that this is definitely a positive for the US empire, a side quest, but I'm not sure it's the main reason. The operation in Venezuela in January was to control oil, but at the same time, that's a country that is now effectively a US puppet state, as the acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, is supposedly backed by the US. Also weird that Rodriguez is, or was, a Maduro loyalist. Maybe she wasn't as loyal as some thought. The acting president can stay in office for up to 180 days without holding another election, but if it's declared that the president is going to be gone permanently, then elections must be held within 30 days. Interesting why elections haven't been held. I don't think anyone thinks Maduro is going to be back in the country as president anytime soon. So the Venezuelan government, much like the US government, is doing whatever they want. So they have Venezuela and they're thinking about taking Cuba, whether through a firm handshake and a pinky promise or another special operation. And a special operation it'll probably be, if it's a military operation. They won't be attacking and bombing Cuba like they were in Iran. It'll be a quick Delta Force drop or whoever, and they'll have the country under their thumb. But there is one problem. Kind of. China and Russia are allies with Cuba, and while they're not really a threat to the US militarily, they could exert political and economic pressure. And then you have a diplomatic mess on your hands. I mean, Venezuela is or was an ally to Russia and China and even Cuba. And they didn't do shit when Delta rolled in and started blasting. So I don't know what a Cuba regime change would even entail. I do think, however, that the larger game is control of Latin America, to pillage resources as well as bolster defense. The US already has an extensive defense apparatus that affects even its citizens and violates their freedoms. So why do we need to take over countries to increase national security? We don't. But what if they're planning something larger than the attacks on Iran? Maybe a full-scale war or something close to it. Their reasoning would probably be that if we're in a full-scale war, we want to be surrounded by allies, not enemies, which obviously makes sense, strategically. The closest countries to the US are Mexico, Canada, and the rest of Central and South America. Canada is, for better or worse, an ally, and they'll fall in line if need be. They're at least a part of the Western sphere of influence. Venezuela and Cuba, though, are allies with enemies of the West, and being so close to the US are prime targets for takeover and regime change. A takeover of countries in Latin America would, in the eyes of the US military and government, create a sort of buffer zone between the US and her supposed enemies, at least at the top and bottom of the country, because we would still have the coasts to worry about. We might see more countries fall to the US as time goes on, and I'm curious to see how all this plays out in 2028 if a Democrat or someone that's not on the same wavelength as the Trump administration takes power. What do you think? Are we headed to a larger scale war, or are these special operations just smaller resource grabs for the sake of generating more wealth for the ruling class? Do you think a regime change in Cuba could go horribly wrong and we could be looking at another Bay of Pigs? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and please like, repost, comment, retweet, and upvote. Bye.